Hi, everybody. Welcome to Central. I'm Freddie, and Cam is on Salt Spring Island tonight, but he's joining us virtually, which is great. We have Larry in the seat there, and we also have our special guest tonight, Lyn Ulbricht, who I'll introduce in a moment. I just want to say special thanks to our main sponsor, Quadriga. Quadriga CX is Canada's best online Bitcoin trading platform, and of course, we have our second main sponsor is Airbit's, the best-looking Bitcoin wallet in the universe right now. So we want to thank them for being so kind and supportive of our cause here. So tonight we're going to introduce a fine young woman. Her name is Lyn. Lyn is the mother of Ross Ulbricht, an extremely young man who unfortunately had to, deal with some justice, some how should we say, ill-placed justice. And tonight we're here to talk about that. Lyn, would you like to say hello and introduce yourself to everybody, please?
Sure. Hi. Yeah, it's good to be here. Thank you so much for your support and the opportunity to show this talk that I gave at the Porcupine Freedom Festival in June. This is the first time it's been shown other than, well, I gave it there, and then this is the first time it's been on the internet. So, and Cameron did a yeoman's job of putting in my PowerPoint. So hopefully it'll come across. I'll be able to convey to you what happened in the trial and the sentencing and why this case is so important to not just Ross and our family, but to all of you, the precedent that's going to be set for the future and going into the digital age. It's a very important case, and we need help appealing it to push back these precedents.
All right, and maybe if you remember the rest of your speech past that, you could just let us know what you were saying. And Lyn, I'm sorry that these technical difficulties happen sometimes. It's just life. You know what I mean? So.
I certainly do. I know all about life. Yeah. Well, let me think. What was it? Where were we on that?
It was, you were just saying.
The witnesses, okay, they block witnesses, but then, see, what was really outrageous was that there was a whole, what we found out later after the trial was that there were two agents who were completely corrupt, they've pled guilty to it, who were stealing, well, they stole about $1 million from the site, but what was even more telling was that they were both computer experts, and they had the ability to commandeer accounts, change passwords, reset PIN numbers, access bank accounts, get on chats, write messages in the forum and the marketplace. In fact, they basically had the keys to the kingdom of Silkroad for almost a year, with the, of course, incentive to create whatever they wanted to divert attention away from themselves, and as one person put it, create a breadcrumb trail away from what they were doing. And so this was not allowed to be heard by the jury. It was fought, the defense fought this and said, look, if we can't, they said, oh, well, it's gonna jeopardize the investigation if if it comes out in trial. So the defense said, okay, let's put off the trial. Put it off till you're done. And they said, well, no. You have a right to a speedy trial. And I'm thinking, well, fair trial too. And in any case, the jury was not allowed to hear it. But what we found out later was it wouldn't have jeopardized their investigation at all, because those agents knew that they were being investigated. They'd already been interviewed by law enforcement. So the court allowed that to be precluded, and the jury didn't get to hear it. And that to me is a huge scandal. It's depriving Ross of a fair trial. It's depriving the jury of knowing the full story. And so that came out. And that's just another example of how the government operated in this case to get what they wanted, which was that conviction. In the speech, I also go into the sentencing, which was draconian, double life sentence plus other things, some more years, another 35 years on top of that for all nonviolent offenses. and kind of go into the details of that sentencing. You know, it started before the thing crashed. It talked about what was not allowed at trial, but the other thing was what was at trial that shouldn't have been, which was the murder for hire charges. And I have a slide which you didn't get to see, that says exactly that the prosecutor said Ross is not charged with those crimes, but then they went on to talk about it for a day, poisoning the atmosphere and prejudicing the jury. And the defense had said this shouldn't be allowed, and it was. And not only there, but it helped deprive him of bail, as I talked about, the witness list. And then later it helped justify this sentence. And yet it was never charged, never convicted, never proven. Now, as one person said, if they had something, it would have been the top of their list of things to accuse Ross of. So that was a whole other thing, is what they brought to it. It was all part of this controlled narrative of painting a certain picture of what they wanted the jury to hear and leaving out what they didn't want to include. And that is not a fair trial. That is not how it's supposed to go. And then in the talk, I went on to talk about the messages that the prosecution and the government is basically telling us through this. Oh, because after, sorry, my brain's a little late here. After the sentencing, which was, again, sent shockwaves worldwide because it was so over the top, some commenters on Reason.com were upset about it and made some comments about the judge, which the government decided were threats. They actually, from what many lawyers and some judges said, they were not threats. They were obnoxious comments, okay? And the government issued a grand jury subpoena to Reason to turn over these people's private information, presumably so they could prosecute them and potentially put them in prison for making comments. And they also issued a gag order on Reason so they couldn't talk about this. This is a big deal. This is protected speech. And I don't know what the ultimate outcome has been at this point. Huge brouhaha about the subpoena. But the point is, the process itself is the punishment. It's cost money. It's intimidating. Nobody wants to deal with the government and a grand jury subpoena. So it leads to just naturally a censorship situation where a website will be more careful about what comments they allow on their site, or a commenter will self-censor so that they don't have the government going after them. And how far away is this from prosecuting and persecuting political speech, for example? For instance, at the sentencing, the judge used Ross's political views as his libertarian views, basically anti-government, to justify this sentence. She called those views dangerous and troubling. Well, political views are protected under the First Amendment in the United States. They're not supposed to be used against you in sentencing. It was very obviously a doubling down of the drug war. They made it very clear that Ross was an example, that he was going to be serving time not just for what they said he did, but what for other people who they hadn't caught yet have done to deter them, even though it's been proven that huge, long sentences just don't deter anyone. And that they're putting out a warning about the drug war, which is a total failure, which hasn't stopped anyone from using drugs at all, and has cost billions of dollars, and has ruined a lot of lives. I go and visit Ross in the prison, and I've gotten to know the families and the children and see them visiting their fathers, their husbands, nonviolent people, a lot of drug offenders. And it's heartbreaking, and and the impact that it has on these children and the families is awful. And the fact that they have doubled down on this with this case is, well, this is a battle in the drug war. So if people are against this drug war, helping us appeal this and push it back is a way to fight back. Since then, President Obama has come out and pardoned not enough people, but people who are nonviolent drug offenders. He's the first president to visit a prison. And now Congress is looking at mitigating some of these draconian laws that we have in the United States, mandatory minimums and so on. And the whole trend is going against what Catherine Forrest did in that sentencing.
Lynn, can I ask you a question?
Mm-hmm.
So before all of this happened and this unfortunate sequence of events entered your life, what did you think of the drug laws? And like, would it even enter your mind, like what was going on, and the war on drugs and all that kind of thing? And like, is it what you've had to experience as a result of what Ross was pinned with? That's definitely, would you say that's definitely like affected your feelings towards and your judgment towards what's happening in the war on drugs and that whole thing?
Well, yeah, I didn't give it a lot of thought. I did have a friend several years ago that was arrested for marijuana and got a mandatory minimum sentence of 5 years, which at the time I'm like, well, that's not right to have a mandatory sentence. The judge should decide. This is unconstitutional. This is wrong. But then I really didn't give it a lot of thought. Ross, frankly, was not into drugs. My daughter isn't. I'm not saying, there was no exposure to drugs. I'm just saying that wasn't an issue or a problem or anything in our family. So I didn't think about it a lot. Since this has happened, of course, I've become much more aware of it and seen that it's like alcohol prohibition. It hasn't solved the problem at all in 40 years, and it's expanded government power tremendously and allowed the government to trample on people's liberties and use it as an excuse to do that. So I've become much more knowledgeable about it, read more about it, been more aware of it, talked to more people who are aware of it. So yeah, I'm much more, cognizant of the whole thing now.
Yeah, and obviously you're aware of what's happening in Colorado and
oh yeah,
sorry, that's the cat, and in Washington. So and that
people are in jail in Colorado for marijuana in a state where it's legal.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I hear you. I totally hear you. Do we have any questions for Lynn? Go ahead, Kieran. This is my buddy Kieran is going to ask you a question.
You see? Hi, Lynn.
Hey, hi.
So I watched a video with you being interviewed by a reporter for a magazine. Maybe it was Reason Magazine, and you were talking about some of the benefits of Silkroad on basically saving lives and that kind of thing. Disintermediating the drug trade and removing the risk of meeting a drug dealer in the alley and that kind of thing. I just wanted to know what your thoughts were on that. Mainly because my mom is a criminal defense lawyer, and 99% of the trials she does are for marijuana-related crimes, grow-ups, that kind of thing. And I'm just super interested to know what your thoughts are on that and what kind of analysis you might have done on benefits of things like the Silkroad.
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, I'm really not defending the Silk Road because there are a lot of unsavory aspects to it. I'm not defending. There are on the internet as well. I mean, like I said that in the talk. So I'm not really. What I really concentrate on more are what most people are not paying attention to, which is what the government's doing through this case. I feel more qualified to talk about that, and I've learned from our attorneys and that sort of thing a lot about it. I have read some of the harm reduction studies. I've talked to Tim Bingham, who did one. It makes sense that the rating system and all that. I wouldn't come out and say, well, that justifies the cite. I'm just really not. Really, I feel like let's all just stop doing drugs and it would solve the whole thing. I'm not going to advocate for drug use or promote it in any way. But that said, I've had people say, well, the people who really were upset about it were the cartels. And although Silkroad was a small fraction of the drug trade. And I really don't think the case is really about drugs. I think that there were other things that were more disturbing to the powers that be, Bitcoin being one. This is my personal theory, having a free, unregulated market. So I haven't really studied, I've been very extremely overloaded since Ross was arrested, and so I haven't sat down and studied them, but I have corresponded and spoken with some of the people who did those studies, and I have looked at them. And actually, after the sentencing, a huge study came out, the Global Drug Survey. 100,000 people were surveyed, and they came to the same conclusion, that it did save lives. The reason it was brought up by our attorneys, this harm reduction, was because in the sentencing, the government brought forward the cases of 6 people who they alleged died of drugs they bought on Silkroad, and they brought in parents of 2 of those people. One of them was an adult. They brought in a parent, and the other was a teenager, an older teenager. But there were 6 alleged deaths. It was very heartbreaking. It was very, very difficult. I mean, it's so awful to have someone lose someone like that. But we ended up bringing forward the idea that, well, actually, Silkroad saved lives, but also we had to hire a pathologist. The forensic pathologist cost $9,000. I just finished paying him off, which is one of the hidden expenses of fighting the government. I mean, it's just endlessly expensive. Who analyzed each death and came to the conclusion that you couldn't say that they died of drugs from Silkroad at all. And in fact, a couple of them might not have died of drug use. One could have died of a stroke. One had just gotten out of the hospital for pneumonia. So, but this was brushed aside by the judge, was not considered. And so anyway, that's the defense was kind of pushing back on this whole thing of Silkroad caused deaths, and that was one of the reasons it was brought up at the sentencing.
I have a question. How much if you don't mind sharing?
Thanks very much, Lyn.
Yeah. Sure. I mean, I know it's not a very good answer because I'm not really an expert on that subject. Yeah.
And just because you touched on it, I can only imagine how expensive the whole process was in so many ways, but were we talking about $100,000? Was it a $100,000 case for you guys, or? We're way beyond that.
I honestly, I'm not exactly sure what we owe the attorneys at this point. Now we're approaching. It's going to be $1 million by the end of this thing. It's insane. Trials are like $35,000 a week. And then there's all these experts, and we had to fly people in, and we had to. I mean, and we owe this money. I mean, we paid a fair amount from help from people and for our own money, but which is quickly running out. But so to continue with this appeal, it costs money. It's the government seems to have unlimited money, and we don't. And that's one of the reasons I think they crush people, is that they can just keep going and going and going, and it's hard for individuals to sustain that kind of fight. So yeah, no, I wish it was $100,000. That'd be great.
It's a big. Do you have any questions?
I got one actually. Go ahead. When did you find out, or when did Ross tell you about his involvement with the Silkroad, and what was your reaction to it?
Oh, I found out when he was arrested. I didn't know anything about Silkroad. My reaction was, there's more to this story, and this can't be true. And honestly, I still think there's more to the story. A lot of it wasn't allowed to come out. A lot of the corruption information is still sealed. I don't know why. They've already pled guilty, but the government is keeping it sealed. So we don't know the extent of the corruption. And I think there's a lot more of the story. But anyway, my reaction was shock. And, I've got to help him. My husband and I were just, well, we've got to do what we have to do. We know Ross. He's a great person. And, I just, I felt like, well, we've just been kind of in disbelief. We still are sometimes. It's still kind of shocking to wake up and you go, Ross is in prison, and this is happening, and media is calling me, and what what happened? You know, it's just insane. So anyway, it was that's when we found out, when we got a call from a reporter.
It is pretty overwhelming. It's like you're basically shoved from suburbia into the world spotlight. You know what I mean? Like, it's absolutely incredible. Do we have another question for Lynn?
Yeah, what's happening now?
Oh yeah, Lynn. So where are you guys at exactly right now, and what are you doing moving forward?
We are. What our main purpose now is to fund the appeal. That's Ross's chance, and it's also the chance to push back the precedents, which was also in my speech. The different precedents, and I don't know if we want to get into all that now, but eventually that speech will be up on YouTube. You can watch it, but
Lynn, it's on our YouTube channel now.
Oh, okay. Well, I go into the precedents, and that's why people should care about this. Because look, you don't know Ross. It's not really personal for you like it is for me. But also, this is the future. You guys are young. This is your future. I mean, I've lived a lot of my life. I care about my future, but this is your future and how it's going to go and how free you're going to be. And things are changing really fast. And it looks to me like the government and different governments are using cases like this and precedent that's set here to curtail our freedoms and expand their power. I think it could go either way. I think we're at a crossroads, and it's important to, push back. There's just different things that precedents that were set in this case. It'll trickle down, and I know you guys are in Canada. But I think what happens in the States does impact things outside the States too. It's kind of a worldwide effort here, I think. So.
Yeah, it totally does. I mean, I often think my lucky stars that we have you guys next door and not other countries. That's for sure. And it's true.
Well, hopefully, us can continue to feel that way.
Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, it's just unfortunate. The whole sequence of events is unfortunate.
Well, and not just in this case, but it's a case study in what's happening and how they prosecute people. And of course, being involved in this, I'm reading case after case of prosecutorial abuse and corruption in the justice system, and it's very upsetting. It's very frightening. We have to have fair trials. That's like a pillar of freedom. If you don't have a fair trial, we're going back to show trials,
And the crazy thing is just such a big business. It's just, like you said, it's just such a big business. And the resources, is like you said earlier too, it's like, how can you compete with an enemy that has basically endless resources? Like, it's such an attrition. It's absolutely brutal. Do we have any more questions for Ms. Ulbricht?
Yeah. Wondering about the media attention this is getting. The story is so interesting to me. It's better than most news things I see on TV.
Or more interesting, you mean? Yeah.
More interesting, more fascinating.
Yeah, a lot of depth.
More intriguing. Like, is there any big, like, ABC, NBC, like, coming, like, with you to, like, get this news story out?
Well, we could have done that. We've had offers, and we declined. My experience, and that's why I like to talk to grassroots groups like you, because I feel like you're not going to distort, misquote, misrepresent what I have to say. I'm not saying they will or they won't, but we have had that experience with mainstream media, and it's very frightening to think about doing something really big and having it come across not how you want. It's a terrible feeling to go, I didn't say that, or that they changed that, and it's out there. And so we could have done a few big things, but we didn't do it. So.
Is anybody writing a story? Is there a book being written, Lynn? Do you know anything about that kind of thing? Is there a book about the story being written, or a movie, or anything like that?
Yeah, well, I'm planning to write a book, but I haven't done it yet. But I believe there is a book being written. I have no idea how accurate it is. There was a book by Lyn Ulbricht that was written, but that was before a lot of things happened. And there's 2 movies that I know of. They're Hollywood. Judging from the guy who wrote in Wired a 2-parter, he's basically, it was a movie treatment that he's pitching his movie idea. It had so much crap in it, I couldn't believe it, including he portrayed the FBI agent Tarbell as just stumbling upon this way to find the server that everybody says was a lie, and he portrays it as if it's true in his movie. So we may have the Hollywood version with the, but I don't think it's going to be,
Well, it might be
anything.
probably Brad Pitt.
Playing the FBI agent. He'll be the hero or whatever. But I don't have a lot of faith. Now, both of those movie efforts, the people involved with them wanted our participation, and we declined again. I don't feel like I can, I have no control, and I don't really want to be involved and validate an effort that I have no idea how they're going to portray Ross. I don't have a lot of faith in Hollywood. Why would I?
Yeah,
So
I think that a lot of people have a lot of. I think Ross's character. I may be mistaken, but he comes across like if I'd be so bold to say, Snowden. You know what I mean? He kind of has that same sort of like, I'm not fighting the man, but fighting for justice in a freer market and freer opportunity for people. So I think that it would come across potentially quite well. He doesn't have a specter over him, Lynn. You know what I mean? Like, he doesn't have, like, when people look at your son, they don't see an evil man. You know what I mean? They see somebody that just happened to do something potentially against the law. And not that the law has anything to do with justice. It's the law. You know what I mean? So I think that a movie about him would probably come across pretty well.
And I think with all the stuff about Mt. Gox and Mark Karpeles kind of being thrown into this, it's going to be
a hell of a story.
Yeah, this is quite the story.
It's a good.
It depends who makes the movie. It depends what their agenda is. Hopefully, it will. And I can tell you, it's true. Ross is a fine person. He really is. And you can, 100 people wrote letters to the judge about his sentencing, and they're on our website, and you can read them. And that's who Ross really is. And these are people who know him personally. These are not, journalists or whatever. And they're people who actually know who he is. And he's a very fine person. And he does care about liberty and justice and people. Very compassionate. And the way a lot of the media has portrayed him has been, this thug, this kingpin, this, evil mastermind. And I feel like that has been somewhat distorted. I'm glad to hear that you have not had that impression. So maybe it's been somewhat counteracted.
Yeah, it was his video that he did in the sound booth with his friend.
Renee, yeah.
That really brought his character out more than anything.
Yeah.
So I think that, if I may say so, I don't think you have to worry so much about the Spectre issue, because that video predates everything. And it gives everybody a very clear indication of his character. You know what I mean?
Now, let me say about that video, that it was made the day before supposedly one of these murder-for-hire plots was made. And I could say, does this sound like some murderer who's planning to kill people? If you watch that video, you're like, no. Now you read comments on the internet, and people are like, oh, he's, the stuff you read on the internet is, it's so misconstrued. But anyway, just to point that out about the video, it's the timing of it.
Yeah.
How absurd is it?
It's very interesting. Another thing that's very interesting, we're going to show everybody the QR code here in a second and talk about your website. But another thing that was very interesting with that video was it seems that Ross had a sense of history. It seems like he has a sense of history. You know what I mean? Like he knows.
Well, I think that he felt, he and I have talked about it. I mean, I think he felt, he could see, and I can see that, our freedoms are eroding, that government is expanding, and there's a time to do things. And he felt very strongly about having people have that experience of a free market, that would maybe make a difference. and that there was a window of opportunity to do it. And that, if in a sense, that's a sense of history. Because really, historically, tyranny has been the rule. And if you look at, history and the big picture. And, again, as I said before, I think we're at a crossroads here, and I think it could go either way. I'm hoping it'll go towards freedom.
Yeah, I think we all hope the same thing too.
Yeah, of course.
Well, it's almost like the Star Wars movies. I don't know if you saw the Star Wars movies.
Yeah.
With Ross when he was a kid, but like there's the Empire and then there's the rebels. You know what I mean? And in the end, and in the end, Princess Leia and Han Solo kiss, and so it could come. It could be good in the end. But what we want to do right now, I'm just showing the QR code here. I'm gonna send something there in a bit. I'm gonna encourage everybody to send whatever you can, $5, $10, $20 to this cause. Let's get Ross out of jail.
Yeah, that'd be great. Even just every little bit helps. If a lot of people give a little, that's great. I mean, a cup of coffee would be. Buy Ross a cup of coffee, kind of thing. It really makes a big difference.
Oops, here we go. I'll show it one more time. There you go. Sorry. Thank you, Peter. Peter's just taking a picture. He's gonna probably put it up on Twitter or something. Oh, what happened? No worries. Talk to you soon. Lynn, we just want to say thank you very much for your time tonight.
Thank you,
It was
Lynn.
fun.
Does anybody else have any more questions before we let the lady go? Are we good?
Can I ask a quick one?
Yes, you can ask a quick one.
If you were to write a book, could the revenues help with the process of appealing?
I'm sorry, I can't
If
hear
you were,
If you wrote a book about it, could the revenues from the novel help your appealing process?
Help the legal process? Is that what you said?
yeah, with the legal fees.
Yeah, it would. I'd get paid, and I pay the lawyer. So, yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Emma, that was a good question.
It's on my agenda. Believe me, I'm thinking of all kinds of ways to raise money. So, and if you'd like a T-shirt, you can go to our website and get a T-shirt.
And
I'll probably be the one that takes it to the post office and mails it to you.
What's the website? Lynn, what's the website?
Yeah, freeross.org.
Okay,
And,
freeross.org, everybody. There we go. Lyn Ulbricht, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Thanks so much for
Great.
letting me. Yeah. Okay. Bye.
Lynn,
I'll tell Ross I visited with you. He'll think it's really great.
Yeah, and let him know that we're with him and we're going to send what we can to help get him out of there.
Thank you.
Okay.
That's
All
great.
right.
I will. Okay. Bye.
Have a beautiful night.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Lynn.
Okay. Night.